Hi, everybody. It's Tim Constantine from the Washington Times, joined as I am every week by my good friend for America. He's Dave Bozell. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you. I don't know if you've heard of this communication app called Signal. Signal. It's supposed to be very safe. If you are making a secret call to your wife, no one else can get a hold of that information. When your conversation is done, it's gone. Some communication between Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, between Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, between Tulsi Gabbard, who oversees all secret information, as they were preparing to bomb Yemen. Now, apparently, somehow, a gentleman who works for The Atlantic by the name of Goldberg got invited to be on this by the National Security Advisor. Nobody knows how this happened, but it's being described by those in the media as a leak. Now, I've been doing journalism a long time, and what the definition of leak is to me is when someone intentionally puts information that's not supposed to get out, secretly leaks information to the media or to the public.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case here. This is clearly an error. They shouldn't have included Mr. Goldberg. However, is this a leak? And more importantly, is this a big deal?
It's not a leak. It's not really a big deal. I want more Signal chats. I like to read more of these things, quite frankly. Every newspaper in the country is missing an opportunity to put a Led Zeppelin communication breakdown song title, right, as their main headline. And that's really sad because there's no creativity in American newspapers anymore. But it's going to end up being a net positive for the president. It really is. If you were in Europe, if you were in NATO, and you thought for any second that President Trump was not serious about Europe pulling their weight and increasing their contributions to the cause, to their own defense, you now know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that his entire leadership apparatus is right behind him 100%, perhaps even more so in the case of J.D. Vance. There's always this sort of this palace intrigue story that comes out of Washington, Tim, that Donald Trump is out on his own reservation and his staff has to corral him back on a wide variety of issues. Here you have, in clear and present ways, the major leadership apparatus of his administration who join him in his policy preference that Europe pay more of their fair share for their own defense. So I think it's going to end up being a net foreign policy positive in the long run for the administration. And then, no, I don't think it's a huge deal. What you said at the top is absolutely right. I'm sure some press guy got a little handsy, got the initials wrong, put the wrong JG initials on the chat, and he was involved in a chat that really was benign in nature. I mean, there wasn't some state secret. There wasn't sources and methods discussed, timings, those types of things. It was a policy discussion, the type of policy discussion, the type of decision-making discussion that happens in every single business in America across the country. This time, it was involved a military action, but these types of things are happening in every business in America. Most Americans understand that, and the press is just engaged in this just gotcha sensationalism that's just not going to work for them.
To your first point, the description of the team all being exactly that, a team with Trump, is absolutely vital here. The Trump administration made clear to the Houthis that if you continue this, there will be a price to pay, and clearly the entire team was on board with that. So if I'm part of Hamas, or if I'm Iran, or if I'm other potential enemies of the United States, I'm taking note of this. Geez, his entire team is rock solid on this. So I think that's a very valid point you've made there. The second part is the hypocrisy of the American media never ceases to amaze me. When Hillary Clinton set up her own server, what was found at the other end is not only that she deleted 30,000 emails that she didn't want the public to see, but also they were vulnerable to Chinese hacking, that they had indeed been hacked by the Chinese, and who knows what secrets might have gotten out. I did not hear the hue and cry from the media at that point. It was, oh, well, it's okay.
Right.
And I'm thinking, no, it's not. That's the Secretary of State, and virtually all of her communication was visible. So This error, it was an intentional effort on the Clinton camp to set up their own server and avoid the government computer system. So here, when somebody got fat thumbs and pushed the wrong name, and Goldberg got on and then hovered on there, and on one hand, I'm a little critical of him staying on for the matter of days that this went on. On the other hand, if it was me, truthfully, I probably would have stayed on and monitored it out of fascination. So I can't criticize him there. I can criticize the fact that he acts as though this is a crime against humanity, that he somehow got in on the discussion.
Well, it's not just the Hillary. I mean, the Hillary example is a good one. But how about some of these squishy Republicans who can't seem to go on a liberal network and call this out for what it is? I mean, I just heard Mike Rogers on CNN earlier this morning suggesting that there needs to be an IG investigation where we need to get to the bottom of how and who and when and blah, 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 blah. Why? So we could just spend like hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money to find out that a communications guy put the wrong initials? There, done, over. And even if they did it, they're going to wrap that investigation and put it into a closet, and they're going to say, well, whether it was egregious or whether it was purposeful, if it was, they're not going to say that. And if it wasn't, they're not going to say it. And so the press is just going to run with whatever narrative they want to run with.
Here's my question. When you say, or if it was purposeful, who on that team would include a guy from the Atlantic? Would Mike Waltz? No. Literally, they have a history of disliking each other.
No
so Mike Waltz clearly wouldn't do it on purpose. J.D. Vance wouldn't. Tulsi Gabbard wouldn't. There isn't anybody on that team that would intentionally include this reporter from the Atlantic. It's absurd. Someone clearly just clicked the wrong button. What's interesting is Waltz said, I don't even remember ever meeting this guy, so I don't know how he's in my phone.
Right. Well, and then there's a situation which I find fascinating. You've got a bunch of the leadership apparatus agreeing with the president, and they must know that the president is not on the chat too. So sometimes you get into a situation, and I'm sure this happens in Oval offices, in the Oval and the Situation Rooms, where maybe you personally disagree, but you're even sort of semi-privately with your leadership apparatus, just nod your head and say, yes, sir, you're right. And so the fact that they're agreeing with the president, and some of them are actually taking it a little bit more aggressively, in the case of J.D. Vance, and he was disagreeing with the timing and those. I think that's fascinating. And so long as sources and methods weren't discussed, that's fine, and they weren't. So it's much ado about nothing. It's a Washington elitist story. Only Washington can know what we're doing overseas, and that's why they pay us the big bucks.
I told you the story when the Mueller report came out. It came out on a Tuesday. $30 million, 2-year investigation. Washington was frozen. Oh, biggest thing since World War II. I went home the next day to Florida and went to my son's Little League game where they were talking about Johnny and his double that night. They were not focused on the Mueller report, and that was a lot bigger deal than this. This is not a big deal.
I'm really kind of tired, too, of people suggesting that we absolutely must know, and I'm on the Armed Services Committee, and I must know. I'm old enough to remember when Ken Starr put together his impeachment report of President Bill Clinton, and he walks it into the Senate, and he puts it in a private office, and it's under lock and key, and he had to sign in to read the impeachment report, and not one member of Congress wanted to do that. Not one, right? So these guys will say that they want to know, but more often than not, they really don't.
I'm going to give you an even better example from present day. The JFK files were released, 80,000 pages, but they were released in actual paper form. You can't go online and use AI to look for certain words. You have to read 80,000 pages. How many meaningful articles have you read about that in the last week?
That's right.
0. Because nobody's going to go read 80,000 pages.
That's a cultural thing. Nobody reads anymore. We'll have to solve that in another episode.
We all want to know if somebody else can find out for us.
That's right.
For America, he is Dave Bozell. I'm Tim Constantine from the Washington Times. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tim.